bustling race for mayor of Manchester is underway with two candidates both eyeing the corner office at City Hall so far. Last week we spoke with challenger and 2019 candidate Victoria Sullivan. This week we have Rich Girard, who recently launched his campaign. Rich, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, Adam. Thank you.
So we asked Victoria Sullivan the same question to start last week, and I want to put it to you. Amid a pandemic and a lot of uncertainty, this has to be one of the more difficult times to be mayor. Why do you want that job?
Well, Adam, I take a look at what's going on, and I think that a particular skill set is necessary to help the city move forward. I have been involved directly and indirectly with City Hall, city government, city politics for 30 years now. I know the issues well. I think I have some answers, or at least some different approaches that people should consider. And I think the timing is right for somebody who brings my background, my expertise, my knowledge of city government and how it works, and more importantly, what needs to be done to change it. And I have an idea or two on that front too. So I decided the timing was right to step forward to offer that background and experience to help lead the city forward.
And the incumbent mayor, Joyce Craig, has not announced her plans yet, but many expect her to run. Where has she fallen short, in your opinion?
Well, I think Mayor Craig has tried hard, but I think she is often conflicted about what to do. I think an example of that is how she criticized Governor Sununu in the state for its failure to remove the homeless encampment around the Hillsborough County Courthouse in the heart of downtown. And when it was announced it was going to be done, she opposed it. So she has a way of being on multiple sides of the same issue, and she seems to be overwhelmed by events. And so generally speaking, I think she's put her best foot forward, but I think she has proven not adequate to the task.
You've just put out a plan to address the homeless situation in Manchester. Take us through some of that and how it would be different from the policies enacted by Mayor Craig.
Well, one of the things that Mayor Craig and the Board of Aldermen have done is actually attract the homeless to the city. It's axiomatic. The more you provide for people who are in need, the more people who are in need will come. And I think the real break point for this was when the city decided it was going to offer fenced-in camp areas that had police protection, meals delivered, toilets, water, blankets, tents. I mean, they gave everybody everything that they would need and want to stay outside. And that really pushed the city's homeless numbers up beyond a point that was already bad. So my approach, frankly, is to encourage those who are not from the city to A, not come here, and B, if they aren't from here, to not make it so comfortable for them to settle in. 3 out of every 4 people who are homeless in Manchester, and this is according to the city's own data, are from outside of the city of Manchester. And Manchester cannot expect that other communities are going to take care of their own if Manchester has so willingly rolled out the red carpet and offered all of these different services and reasons, not only for people to come to Manchester if they're homeless, but to not take advantage of the shelters, the food pantries, the soup kitchens, the medical facilities, and everything else that's already here to take care of them. So the primary thrust is to stop attracting the folks here that are causing so much disruption throughout the city.
You say you don't want to make it comfortable, but does that mean you have to make it uncomfortable? I don't know. Where do you draw the line there? Well,
I mean, look, the city has got somewhere in the ballpark of 24 ordinances, to say nothing of the state laws that are on the books, that are violated each and every day by these folks who are homeless. Now, being homeless is not a crime, and I'm not trying to criminalize homelessness, but the behaviors that they engage in have serious effects on the businesses, the neighborhoods, the crime rate, the drug usage, and everything that just detracts from the city's quality of life. And if the city is serious about addressing this issue, then it can't have 2 sets of rules. It can't have a set of rules for law-abiding people, people who are, who have homes, who live here, and a different set of rules for people who are homeless, because if you allow homeless folks to violate all of the ordinances that are being violated without any challenge, then all you do is invite more homelessness and more of that bad behavior. And this is what major metropolitan areas like Seattle, San Francisco, and other places have done that have completely destroyed their communities.
Obviously, in the wake of the killing of George Floyd last year, there was a renewed look at policing. Of course, we just had the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial. I'm curious, what's your perspective on how Manchester police should be operating? Do you think they should be a trend in a direction towards what we're seeing in the more ideas of reform?
No, I don't. In fact, I think Manchester's got a pretty good police force, and I want to give credit to former police chief Dave Mera, who did a terrific job with community outreach, especially to, we'll call them new Americans, whether they're immigrants or refugees, whose cultures were not used to Western-style policing. And what I think Manchester needs to do is renew and redouble those efforts to reach out not just to new communities, but to existing communities and neighborhoods, and rebuild the bonds between the police and the neighborhoods. I'm not in favor of this intrinsic bias training. To me, that says that if you're a cop, you're racist, especially if you're a white cop. And we all know this critical race theory that is part of intrinsic bias training indicts the white race as inherently racist and irredeemable because of it. And I don't think we should be insulting our police officers by requiring them to sit through training that disparages them inherently. I also think that what we need to do is hire the best person for the job. So I'm not terribly excited about the announcement, the recent announcement of the police chief that by 2030, a certain percentage or a certain number of Manchester police officers will be women. I want to see women on the police force. However, I want them to be qualified to do the job they're hired for. And I don't think there should be any standard that is going to have the police department maybe hiring people that shouldn't be hired so they can say, oh, look, we're politically correct. We have X number of women. And for that matter, if we're going to do that, maybe we should have a program that's desired to hire more men as teachers, since the overwhelming majority of teachers in the city are women.
Don't you think the police department should reflect the community, though? Wouldn't you want a policy in place to help that?
I think what happens is a police department reflects its community when people in the community want to be part of the police department. I'm not saying there shouldn't be outreach. I'm not saying there shouldn't be efforts to encourage people of all races, backgrounds, creeds, colors, whatever, to be police officers. I think it's a mistake, though, to set targets on how many people will be hired, whether they're women or people of color or people of certain religions, to say we're going to have X as a quota so that we, quote, reflect our community. I think what's more important is the police that we hire, or the people we hire for any job, are dispassionate in the conduct of their duties. They're qualified, capable, and dedicated to doing the job. I don't care what color they are. I don't care what race they are. I don't care what sex or gender they are, as long as they meet those criteria. And I think if they do, then they'll interact with the public in a way that reflects that, and we won't have some of the tensions. And I come back to the example under Chief Mera.
We've hit our time, unfortunately. We appreciate your time here on Close Up. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you out there on the campaign trail.
Appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.